This session will explore how Indigenous Tourism Associations can drive growth and development within our communities. Please note that this panel will be recorded by Kinu for course content, and throughout the conference, the Kinu team has been and will be capturing additional footage to be used in their curriculum. So let's welcome our speakers to the stage. So for our moderator for today, we have Faith Myers from Lennox Island First Nation. She is also a Kinu tourism student from Mount St. Vincent University. And joining her on stage, we have Carolyn Swan, Newfoundland and Labrador Indigenous Tourism Association. Kayla Johnson, Indigenous Tourism Association of New Brunswick. Mitchell Rennie, Indigenous Tourism Association of PEI. He's all right. Robert Bernard, Nova Scotia Indigenous Tourism Enterprise Network. Take it away, Faith.
G'day everyone, and welcome to this exciting panel discussion on the Indigenous Tourism Association's role in development. So as part of the 2024 Atlantic Indigenous Tourism Summit, my name is Faith Myers, and I am honored to be your moderator for this session. I'm a student at the Kinu Tourism Program at Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, which is also sponsoring this panel. At Kinu, our goal is to support the growth of Indigenous tourism by providing educational opportunities that empower future leaders in the industry. This session will be videographed and used for course content, ensuring that the knowledge shared today will continue to inspire and educate future generations of Indigenous tourism professionals. Today's panel brings together executive directors of the 4 Indigenous tourism associations across Atlantic Canada. They each bring a wealth of experience, insight, and leadership, and have shaped Indigenous tourism in their respective provinces and the region as a whole. We will be exploring how these associations are working together to foster collaboration, navigate regional differences, and promote sustainable, authentic Indigenous tourism experiences across the Atlantic provinces. We will also discuss the role that education and training have to play in building a strong foundation for growth in this sector. So thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to this discussion on the future of Indigenous tourism in Atlantic Canada and how we can all grow together. So for the first question, to begin, I'd like to ask each of you to help set the context for today's discussion. As executive directors in your respective Indigenous tourism associations, you each play a pivotal role in shaping and developing Indigenous tourism in your regions. Can you share what you see as core responsibilities of your association in driving development? What are the key areas of focus for your organization, and how are you working to support the growth of Indigenous tourism in your region?
Well, good morning, everyone. That's a loaded question, by the way. I think, it's really interesting, the work that we do as executive directors. There's a national strategy in place, and we want to do everything we can to follow a national strategy, but there's also community strategies, there's also regional strategies, there's provincial strategies, strategies that begin to come in play when you're working with elders. We do a lot of work with our elders, and other strategies that come as you come along and identify things that are not in place in your region, things that you want to do with your youth, things that you want to do, obviously, with your businesses, which are part of the first part of the work, piece of the work that we're mandated to do, is promote the growth of Indigenous tourism in our regions. But when you take a look at Indigenous tourism, it's much more than tourism. It's much more than building economies and driving revenues. A lot of our conversations back home are driven around the loss of our culture and the reconciliation piece of that work. And so it's much broader in terms of the cultural tourism piece of the work that we do, and looking at the impacts that are happening across the board to business owners, supporting wonderful, beautiful artists and crafters that we have in our communities. And of course, trying to understand the big picture of where industry is, the tourism industry is, when it comes to understanding what has happened to our Indigenous people across the country. And when you take a look at that, how does that play a role in the organization and your goals and targets for increasing Indigenous tourism business? It's a much more holistic approach for us in our region. And it's been like that the last 10 years. And it's not easy work, because building businesses is tough enough, and looking at opportunities to build your organization and addressing funding needs is another big one. But even fitting into how you can access funding based on criteria and policy that's already set, you're trying to fit into a square box when your mindset as Indigenous people is operating in a holistic circle. And so that's really difficult for us the last 10 years, but we've seen a lot of amazing partnerships. So we've been focused on creating a lot of partnerships and relationships. And, naturally those relationships begin to open new doors, begin to open capacity for your businesses, for your board of directors. But we've also run into the reality that we've had to be the cultural knowledge trainers for the tourism industry, for the partners, for building the allies and all of the work that's required in doing that. So 10 years down, you would think we have a lot of businesses that are lining up to do this work, but part of the challenge is even them believing in themselves and the access that they have to resources within their own communities. So economic development strategies come to play in role, how communities support entrepreneurship, what type of skill sets exist in community. So many different things come to play, but for us it's a holistic, I guess, approach, and trying to fit in, with what's going on with the mainstream tourism industry in the province, what's happening nationally. So that's a lot of the work that we've been involved with, and I'll just stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Did anyone else want to chime in on this question, or can we move on to the next one?
No. I just said no. No, it's one of those, as Robert was speaking, I'm thinking of this question last night. I think everybody in this room knows what we do from like a boilerplate perspective, from membership engagement to marketing to development. And when I was thinking about what the question is, at the core of what we're doing is a lot of, we're living and breathing, trying to develop an industry. We're making connections between members, we're talking to funders, we're trying to find the role that Indigenous tourism can play within current models and strategies. We're reaching out and building partners, we're determining who good allies are. It's a lot of just being connected and waking up and trying to think of how can we move the needle for the members, for our operators, and for the communities. And when we're thinking about that, it's not just a quick approach. Governments can think in cycles, but from an industry perspective, like I think we're going to talk about Kinu and the education component, but we have a capacity issue with incredible demand, but to create those leaders and those employees, it's not a quick fix. So I think some of the things we're doing with Indigenous PEI is even like planting seeds that tourism is a career, showing that it's an industry. I'm seeing a lot in the news that it feels like tourism is getting a bad rap because it's a entry job, or it's a first-time job that is seasonal. But we're all here, I'm 17 years in tourism, working full-time. And bringing in like our summer students, I can see that spark. And the 4 staff that we have, nobody worked in tourism before. So it's one of those things where it's like we're very slowly planting a seed that tourism is important, and that from a development perspective, like there is a career path here. So it's, but we have to think long term, and I think that's our role, is just to think of that while your businesses are thinking about the product you make, and then we can sell them and we can do all those other aspects. But I think it's more long-term vision, bringing it together and providing a source for people to go.
Thank you. For the next question is about collaborative growth and versus competition. So each of your regions has unique priorities and challenges, but at the same time, there are many similarities. How can we foster growth in Indigenous tourism in a way that is complementary rather than competitive between provinces? What specific strategies can be used to create a united front in promoting Indigenous tourism in Atlantic Canada? Kayla?
That's a really good question, and I think, I don't want to sound cheesy, but events like this is a great start. Bringing everyone in the room together collectively, not only as like directors of the associations, but also members, so you get to collaborate with whoever is doing something similar to you in a different province is really, really powerful. So having that opportunity to have these conversations and discuss what worked for you is a really great way to collaborate, because in reality, we're on the same land. We're all sharing the same, most of us are part of the Wabanaki territory, plus the Inuit in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we're in this together. There's no differences between the Atlantic provinces. And I'm, of course, like I mentioned yesterday, for those of you that weren't in the room, I'm only 6 months in this role, but the amount of support that the other directors have provided regularly, and we meet every 2 weeks or try to, and just see how we can collaborate, because the Indigenous tourism industry is Atlantic Canada-wide at this point. We all share similarities, so I don't think competition even is a thing that exists for us. It is all collaboration, connections, sharing successes, discussing challenges, and seeing how we can grow together. Not to do that, that was unintentional plug for the for the conference, but instead of in silos. So yeah, that's all.
Awesome. Does anybody else like to talk about that, Carolyn?
Yeah, sure. I think at the end of the day, when a visitor wants to go on a trip, you know, they're limited on time and money, and so they have a lot of options in the world. But collectively, being Atlantic Canada, we have such an opportunity to encourage them to come and visit the overall area. They can select where they would like to go, but then we also encourage them to come back and come back and come back. And what I've experienced myself many times is that people actually fall in love with the land, and they fall in love with the people. And it's been a very positive experience overall. You do have to sometimes share difficult things and things of past, things of the future too. And you may have emotional reactions with your guests, but that builds a bond that usually will be lifelong. And when you have that bond and they start to realize that there's actually Indigenous people throughout the entire Atlantic area, they're very interested to learn more. And they want to get out to each community. They want to see the different areas, and they want to do the different activities. And Indigenous tourism enables that. Your original question about like what is our role and what do we do, I really see us as enablers. We have so many talented people. We have different businesses. We have organizations. We even have youth that are very interested in the industry, and our organizations are there to enable them to know that there's an actual professional career path called Indigenous tourism, and you can do a ton of different things when you work in it. You could do simple things that may be seasonal and maybe a few hours a day, and that's okay. You could do really intense things that may be 15 hours a day for the entire year long, or switch out to different career options. There's so many different avenues. And so when it comes to collaboration, I think it's really neat because the people that work in tourism don't typically do just one job. They might do 5 different things, and throughout their life, they may even travel to different spots to do those jobs, partner with different companies. So it's just a natural fit to have collaboration over competition. But competition does still exist. When you have 5 customers going to an area, they're only able to stay in so many places and go for so long. So I would encourage everybody to be themselves, tell their story, because yes, there's a million accommodations out there, but yours can be unique. There's a ton of different experiences, and they may be all out on the land, but the knowledge that you're going to share is unique. It's maybe perhaps from you or from your community or from another friend that you've learned, and that's okay. That's what makes it so special and so diverse, and that's what creates our entire industry. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, all right, I'm going to get back to my train of thought, but I need to put a plug in where when I met Faith 2.5 years ago, we asked her to be on a panel. And this program, when I heard she was moderating, like the growth we're seeing in the leaders from Kinu, like
Thank you.
I've only been here for 2.5 years, but I see the growth in each community, and like we're only starting, especially like on PEI, it feels like we're in our infancy in the industry. And going back to the question on like competition, there is so much demand for the product that we are nowhere near a level where we have to fight. I think what it would be is the more we create, the more that there's a clustering of product. We can create Atlantic Canada as, oh, you got to go there because they have great Indigenous offerings, and then that gives us more opportunity above that. And I just feel like from a competition perspective, all of us are working towards that capacity building goal, and like hopefully we're fighting for visitors in the future, but I think right now the collaboration and such, it's the more product we can develop is the real important thing.
So the next question is, can each of you share 1 or 2 Indigenous tourism initiatives from your region that have been particularly successful? What makes these initiatives work, and how can those lessons be shared across the Atlantic region? Maybe we'll start over here with Robert, if you're ready.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about the Kinu program. And that originated a number of years ago when our organization was having difficulties with the tourism industry understanding the purpose for Indigenous tourism growth. They weren't understanding how we believe in tourism. There was a feeling that you need to believe in what tourism is based on what we've identified as priorities and what we've identified as the plan. So you need to fit into that plan. That was difficult for our elders and our organizations, and seeing what our businesses were going through and the supports that weren't there for them through the mainstream industry, and how we were trying to secure partnerships, funding, all those elements. And so we were, talking as a board, and I was talking to our so our board is made up of mostly elders, and our leader, Kathy Martin, we were talking and we said, we need to look at how we're going to change the way people think about and know about Indigenous people and how it applies to Indigenous tourism. So we started thinking about, okay, where does this change? And it changes in how people get certified in tourism, and where did they get the training and education. So we thought about MSVU as a natural link, because Kathy at the time, she was sitting as the Nancy's chair at the time and just coming out of that role. So we approached Jennifer Guy with the university. They had conversations. We took it a next step forward, and we just thought, is there a way to create curriculum based right out of the university that Indigenous and non-Indigenous students can start learning about the work that we do, but also Indigenous people nationally, internationally, but even more specific from the Mi'kmaq Ulnu Nation and their own background. Like, people still, when you ask them, where are you from? Nova Scotia, Cape Breton. It's automatic. it's not automatic to us. We're from Mi'kma'ki, we're from Unama'ki. It's a totally different mindset. So in order to understand Indigenous people, you have to change the mindset from where you come from. So we're trying to change the mindset of how students see tourism. And that's going to happen through this Kinu tourism program. And the work that's been done the last 3 years, and now the first cohort is starting up, and you're part of the first cohort. So it's very exciting. But there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of conversations that are still happening. How's it going to roll out? Who's going to, I mean, we've had an issue with who's going to deliver the curriculum. We were trying to find certified Indigenous Mi'kmaq specific people to deliver the curriculum, but there's also some restrictions based on from the university level of you have to have a PhD, a master's in this, and just finding people to deliver that was a big challenge. So, but it didn't stop the program from getting done. We had to make some changes, and so I think that's where valuable partnerships and allies come into play, because they were willing to make the changes to make sure that this happened. And so the funding that we got, close to $2 million from the federal government, now is seeing the benefits, as Mitchell was saying, you know, with the things that you're learning and how it's making changes in your life and the future of what you're going to do. We're going to see that in many students. And this is just the first year. We were thinking 10, 20 years down the road, how many people are going to think differently, work differently, make decisions differently based on this knowledge that they're going to know through this program. And that's our goal. And we're very, very happy that now all of our Atlantic partners are part of that bigger advisory committee. We must have a 40-person advisory committee by now. But it's amazing. It's really filtered out into the communities. Many other Ulnu Indigenous partners across the Atlantic region. All of us are involved in those conversations. And it's just so exciting to see the potential of the next steps. So there's many more, but I'll just highlight that as one of our very proud moments of work in our region.
Thank you, Robert. That was a beautiful answer, and I think I speak for all of the Kinu students when we say we're so thankful for all of the work that has been done, and we're enjoying the program very much. Kayla?
So our membership is growing a lot, so I'll probably choose two members to highlight on both extremes. One amazing example of a tourism leader in New Brunswick is in Metabonagia, the Metabonagia Heritage Park, as well as the Red Bank Lodge in Mi'kmaq territory. Patricia Dunnett has led so many beautiful tourism initiatives and spent decades turning Metabonagia into what it is today, which is a heritage park with tons of knowledge and culture to share both inside and outside. The lodge itself, there's I can't remember the name of the kitchen. Mother Earth, yes, Mother Earth Kitchen. And the thing with Patricia is she never stops, and she's always, if I send her a message at 7, 8 p.m., she's still online, she's still working, still driving to grow the Metabonagia Heritage Park and tourism opportunities for the community. Because with that, she provides opportunities to members to start their own adventure tourism, and she'll promote it under the Heritage Park and the Lodge, and she's building with her team more additions to the property every single year. They just started an agritourism, so there's so many things that's going on that's decades in the making, but as a tourism leader, that kind of opportunity exists for everyone in the community. It's not just her or the staff. And on the opposite end, in Wolastoqey territory, a newer business, her first season, Aspen Bear with Wolastoq Adventures in the Fredericton area. She started with just illuminated kayaks. And within a season, she's starting to do tours at the Delta, and she just bought a pontoon for next season, and she joined our board as the youth representative, and she's going on missions now, and she's trying to take what she learned and learn for herself, but also share with her community and share with the province on how to grow tourism too, just from a kayak and a really cool idea. So it can start from something large that took so much time to build to something super small. And I think the lesson is that dedication and that not giving up. You don't have to own a business to be an entrepreneur. You can work within your community. Or if you want to do it on your own, you can turn something into a full-time opportunity for you like Aspen did. So yeah, those are two businesses. There's so many, though. I want to point out like everyone here from New Brunswick. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline?
Yeah, I'm actually in the exact same boat. Our province is really large. We have the big land of Labrador, and there's so much happening there. And then also, in my opinion, a very big island called Newfoundland as well. It's probably hard to narrow it down to just one, but I'll give you guys some examples of what the amazing staff, we actually have 2 staff in the audience today. Desiree Goodyear, if you want to raise your hand, yeah, and Rob Thomas. We also have Barbara Young, who's not here. Is Robin here this morning? Oh, he's in the back, perfect. So they've been working one-on-one with entrepreneurs, business owners, and community members to figure out what life stage they're at right now in terms of their business, but also just tourism in general. Because people have many ideas and they have many desires, but you only have so much time and so much money. So they've really helped them out individually. And I couldn't label off every single one, but two of the initiatives I just want to mention is a guide workshop that they ran. We actually welcomed 12 guides from across the whole province from many different cultural backgrounds. And guides that had a lot of experience and those that had never guided before but really wanted to become a guide. And over a series of 5 days, we were able to work with them on a sharing level. There was no structure really to the actual week, but they did everything from outdoor adventures to sit-down dinners to cooking together to actually sharing their cultural knowledge and how they have worked in the industry. And within just a day or two, they made really strong bonds. That group has gone on to continue to communicate throughout the summer, actually help each other out with getting jobs and maybe even running businesses together. And we developed guide profiles for these guides, which really elevated them to a point that they grew a lot of confidence. It made such a difference. They started posting them online and sharing them with customers and businesses. And I'll just give one example. Kayla Stride, she's a really famous singer and musician, but she didn't really realize that she was working in tourism. And she's also a potter and an educator. And if your brain is into tourism, you're immediately thinking, wow, she's going to be perfect for tourism right there. And she started to do some workshops. She partnered with a lot of museums and different artisans throughout the province and started offering raccoon workshops outside for guests and people that were traveling through, as well as local community members. And on the side, too, she started doing speaking performances and engagements for cultural welcomes, for conferences as well. And it really started to take off for her, which was really a beautiful thing. Desiree's also done a ton of work with artisans, and Rob in the back, too, has been engaging with people to figure out their ancestry, because that enables them to incorporate the cultural knowledge into their offerings. And on the artisan side, we found there was a big lack of communication and promotion. So we've been working to find, again, those gaps, which each artisan has, and trying to fill them individually to get them out into the market so their art can be shared throughout the world. So I could go on and on. There's so many success stories out there, but I'll pass it over to Mitch.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Faith, but can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So can you share 1 or 2 Indigenous tourism initiatives from your region that have been particularly successful? What makes these initiatives work, and how can those lessons be shared across the Atlantic region?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stretch this one out because it's our conference, and this is a project that I'm happy about. But who's been to the Indigenous PEI store? Show of hands. Okay. Who hasn't? I got two back. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, I started with on, what day was it? Tuesday evening at the pre-registration, so I'm going to apologize if I'm repeating myself, but we're on camera, so I'll play it up. The Indigenous PEI store came as an opportunity that we didn't even really know we wanted. We were approached, and I'll lay a little bit of the background on it, but Mi'kmaq Printing and Design, which was a social enterprise run by MCPEI, they were in a location, they were doing apparel, and Betty approached me and she said, I want to try to sell our apparel and take more of a proactive approach with tourism. There was an opportunity in downtown Charlottetown with a sublease space for 3 months during peak season. She's like, it's more space than I can do with. Do you think there's anything there? And I said, let's see the space, and we went in. And at the time, we were trying to think of how can we get the word out on the products that we have available so that visitors will come to community. And at that time, we were like, do we go to the popular events on PEI because it's a tourism destination, set up a VIC, try to steer people to community, try to have connection, communicate, and then convert them to go, extend their stay. That was the idea that was percolating for the summer, but when we seen the space, we thought there might be something here for us. That was in about April. In May, we got the lease, and we're like, we're opening up in a month. So as you can appreciate, without a budget, without really a game plan, the team that we had assembled this is what we're doing, and we basically got to work. So we didn't have a plan. We basically went by feel, but the idea that spurred it and what we were trying to tell, well, I say trying to tell, Jamie numerous times said, you got to stop spending money. And I said, trust me, Jamie, it's going to work. Luckily, it worked. One of the things that we were getting into is just that our role is to develop product through the associations. PEI is small. There is incredible demand for the product. How can we try to expedite that process to hit the demand? And our thought process on that project was, we have artisans that have cultural knowledge. They have something that's interested to visitors. Why don't we start there? If we could get our artisans at a level base that they're not necessarily like they're selling on Facebook Marketplace, or they're on the powwow trail, or they're consignment in different shops, what if we could stabilize them and then work with them to then maybe say, okay, you're caught up on your product, would you ever come in and do an experience? And then we would work with them, and then what could we add to that? And then to the point of, with the team, we could surround them and do like direct development. So, and then when I first started, or when we thought about this, I said, I don't want to be in retail. I know, like, I'm sure some of you are in retail here. It's not easy. It's one of those things where you're dealing with frontline staff and customers and physical space. So I was saying, if anybody would take this is the idea. Nobody put up their hands, and I said to the board, like, the idea would be we do it and we get out. After we ended up doing it, from a development side of things, I seen the tool that it gave us, because we went from like a virtual organization that had a website that would set up courses or offerings. We had social media channels, but we had no physical place to gather. And I remember one of the first times I was meeting with Melissa Peter Paul, she said, we just need to get our community together. Like, let's start there. So what it had become, and then the other thing to share with the other regions on this, and like, we're open to talk about it. It's not easy, but some of the learnings were, I knew I would get questioned on why are you doing it in Charlottetown and why aren't you doing it in community? So when we were developing, we developed with that in mind, that we were going to get questioned, and it challenged us to say, how can we do this in a way that will help community? The first obvious way is that we're supporting community members from different nations. But the approach we took was, let's use this, and I'm not sure if we have any tourism PEI in here, let's use it as a visitor information center in a sense. We're not officially a visitor information center, but when people come through the door, we know about community. We're talking about the product, we're talking about the people, and then through those conversations they get interested. We know the product that we have in community and we're directly selling. It's a long play. I know it's the return on investment isn't quick, but we've had interactions where a vet has told me a visitor has flown in, did not have a vehicle, landed in her shop, through conversations with her, rented a vehicle, went to Lennox Island, visited Abequit, and came back to tell a vet. Like that there is very hard to put in a report, and it's hard to scale up, but those things occur because of the space that we've created. And one of the other things that I see as a benefit, and I'm around tonight, I love talking about this project because I think there should be more of it, but what it has enabled us to do is engage with our members and plant seeds. And it goes back to what we were talking about, that we're trying to create opportunities because we see other artisans and we can say, you know what, that person should talk to that person. And, or I think, to your point of like, she doesn't think she's in tourism, but we can see some of those skills. And we've done like artisans afternoons on Wednesdays, and it's a way for us to say, come in. We always like to use new artisans. We don't want to repeat it. It's basically, and like I see Jolene, we got a lot of our artisans in here. They don't know that for us, it's a little bit of a test to see how do you interact with public, where are you at in your cycle. We're going to ask them about what they're doing, where they want to go, and we're planting those seeds to be like, okay, next time we do a course, we're going to call her, or I think she's got something there that could be scaled up. Well, I've done it and I charged $20. It's to Darcy's point yesterday. We've had a lot of conversations with artisans where it's like, this is what I charge. And we're like, going back, I think she was talking about her $5 earrings. We've had a lot of those where it's like, well, break that down for me. How long did it take you to make? What's your input costs? And then we're like, we're going to pay you more than that because it's valued more than that, and the industry or the visitors will pay more than that because what we can do is we can talk about it. We've had people that come in and say, oh, that basket, like Joe John's in the back, he's one of our basket weavers. They'll pick it up, a small basket, and say, ooh, $95, and they'll set it back down. Our staff can then go and say, you know why? That is black ash. You know how they do it? We have a strip of ash and we can bring it out and say, this is black ash. You know, it's difficult to get. We can talk about how some of our basket weavers have to go to Maine in order to get it up. The issues they get across the border and bringing it in. Emerald ash borer, the fact of physically holding it and the pounding it, and we show a split one. And then from there you have to weave it. And after we have that communication, because our staff are aware of what it is, they're like, that's a pretty cheap basket. And then you're converting a sale, and that's what we can do. And I know we've had some of our operators that are saying, like, we trust you with our product because you know what it means, and I'm getting back into my art because of it. The staff that have come through and that we're working with, and I said it before, that my permanent staff were not in tourism, and I don't think they thought about it. I'm looking at Nick, like, I'm sorry, Nick. She was going to get her master's in embryology after getting her degree at university, and she was a summer student. Now she's working in tourism. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. It's one of those things where if you can see what's in the people by getting them through the doors, we can train on tourism. Tourism is not necessarily a career, and I'll throw it back to Kinu. We had that conversation last night where I'm like, I'm 17 years in and I'm not formally trained in tourism, and at times I feel like an imposter. And I'm now getting the confidence that fake it till you make it, but these guys are going to come out from an education perspective and shave off 10 years of that journey, and we're going to be expediting that process. But the point I was making on our staff is, like, we have them coming in that are university students, they're starting to bead. They're going to courses. They're like, can we do more? And it's like, we're planting those seeds through this store that in the end I think is going to help the industry. I hope our staff get poached and they become leaders in the industry, because we'll put the next ones through the process and we'll invest in them. But from a store perspective, like, that's the tool it's giving me and our organization. But it's like when you have that, we're always thinking, how can we be complementary and not competitive? So at one point, I'll give an example of some of the ways that, like, we offered a drum making course, and Jamie's like, hey man, I do drum in Lennox. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry. We were trying to put stuff on the agenda. We don't do it again. It's because Jamie that's already there. We're gonna look what's new, what can we develop? And it would be great that after we develop it, they don't need us anymore. They're booking, they have their online site, but we're, as associations, and it's a lot of what we do is like bring somebody in and scale them up, and wouldn't it be great if they don't need us anymore? So the storefront would be, I think, the thing that I would lean on that has become a tool that I didn't know it would be, and I would share with other regions that we're happy to talk about it with a caveat that it's not easy. Like, you have to really want to do this. I know why there's a markup of 100 or 200% in for-profit businesses. Bags are expensive, tissue paper to make it look good, staff, like, it's difficult, but the tool that we have is, I wouldn't give it away at this point, so.
Thank you. So the next question is about filling gaps through training. What key skills or knowledge gaps do you see in your regions that need to be addressed in order to grow Indigenous tourism? And how can educational institutions and training programs such as Kinu help to meet those needs?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention another project that we're involved with, so it kind of ties into this question. We've really realized how important research is, and how much we maybe don't know or don't dig deep enough into our communities, and it might be similar across the region. But we were able to secure some funding from ACOA, so props to the team at ACOA and for listening to us and recognizing the need, and then providing avenues for us to secure that funding. But when we actually started going into the community, we realized, man, there's a lot more needs there than we thought. So a lot of issues on actual people having the business skill sets to run a business, people having the financial capacity to understand, the financial literacy that's required to, like Mitch is saying, right? And many other elements of things that are needed at the community level to help business grow. I think those were the kind of things that we're learning through that research project. And Mitch mentioned and Caroline mentioned staff. I mean, my staff have been working really hard, and I know Stephanie and Kelly are somewhere in the room here. We've been pushing them to keep asking questions in the community level. People are tired of surveys. I know it, I get it. But when you go into the community and when you meet with people, when you have conversations and when you ask them, what are the needs of the community, that naturally comes out. And sometimes it's scary when you're an organization that has limited resources, limited capacity to deliver on the identified barriers that we all see. But it's really, really important to understand that if you don't take the time to listen, if you don't take the time to understand what are the challenges, it's really hard to help businesses grow. And access to finance for us was number one. And how a lot of people don't understand that credit is so important. If you don't have good credit, you're not going to access that finance. You're not going to have that opportunity to secure that funding for your business. So we're now thinking and even talking to Kinu about how can we help people better understand that financing aspect. So we're also approaching MK, which is the organization involved with Mi'kmaq education. How can we bring tourism, but also financial education into the school setting at grade 9, 10, early stages, and start talking about the importance of credit. Other issues we're running into is, so we have about 116 members half of those are not registered members with the Registry of Joint Stocks, because a lot of people have issues with taxation. They don't want to deal with taxation. As First Nations people, as tax-exempt people, they still believe that they don't need to register their business in order to operate a business. The problem with that is that government funding programs prevent them from accessing them if they're not registered businesses. So that's a big issue. So many other elements that we're finding out with the research work that we're doing, and again, thanks to our staff and the work that they do. And so part of that work actually leads to gathering this information. But what we're finding out too is that there's bigger things that, you know, that we're dealing with beyond the business, beyond the community. It's, you know, all these larger barriers that exist for them to even operate or promote themselves. And I'll give you an example. When people travel to, let's say, Halifax, when you get to the airport, it's not the same experience as when you go to Vancouver and you see the face of Indigenous people when you land in Vancouver. That's right. And, you know, the work that was done there was so very important, because maybe they didn't realize that that would impact across the country. And so we're really, really trying to work with the airport now to ensure that people understand where they're landing when they're here. They're in Mi'kma'ki, ancestral, unceded territory. What does that mean, right? So having those opportunities to partner with major airlines, that's another part of the work that we're doing. We're partnering with Destination Halifax and creating videos that we hope to partner and bring to Air Canada and other airlines, so that when people land, the video is going to say, hey, from an elder point of view, you are being welcomed to the traditional ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. That's another project that we're working on. So research, very important. Identifying issues for business growth, very important. And even funding from the federal government and how it rolls down into organizations that deliver that opportunity for funding for businesses. Some of that funding is being delivered by organizations that don't understand the issues with tourism and tourism growth. The delivery body is not connected to the business of tourism. So it's all of those. I guess we're dealing with those issues as EDs. That, you know, how do we work around this? How do we find solutions to help business grow? How do we ensure that, you know, our funding is maximized with events that we bring together? And another real quick project is, or example, is the work that we're doing with Saltscapes. People have heard of Saltscapes in the room before? So we brought together a model that we actually got from the national work that ITAC is doing with RVC. And I remember, Keith, when we first started with RVC, there might have been, what, 8 or 10 companies that were across the country going to RVC. And then all of a sudden, the model started changing with the growth and support of partnerships at the national level. And now, you know, it started from, you know, probably a dozen companies. And then finally, the door opened to have an Indigenous pavilion at the National Rendezvous Canada conference. And now it's huge. I think I asked Keith this last year, how many companies went, maybe Tamaro's right there. How many companies went this past year to RBC? 56? So it's grown from minimum numbers to 56. So we use that model to come to Saltscapes, which is the largest Atlantic Canada showcase for tourism and related businesses. And we brought together probably 15 companies, and we did the same kind of setup. And in the second year that we did it, Saltscapes came back to us and said, hey, do you realize that you guys were the most visited trade show area in Saltscapes? And so the following year, we ended up doing a video of the people that were there and coming in and selling and products. And then we were part of building a, I guess, an opportunity for education on the work that we're doing through the magazines that Saltscapes was putting out. So we were part of like a release of 75,000 magazines in the Atlantic region. So, and it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And so you have to make a decision on, do you utilize that money to help, your small businesses, or do you go a little bigger to help educate, more partners, more communities, more leadership? So that's the level of work that we do. And I don't want to ramble on like somebody else, but anyway, I'll stop there.
It's my conference, so. And I say that in jest. This is our conference. The team back there, this is their conference. But now that I have the mic, I guess I'll keep going. So, Faith, to the education component, the stuff we're talking about here, we complementary and not competitive. If there is a location and there is a program or someone doing it in the right way, with the right panel, with the right supports, I am much more happy fostering those interests and saying, I see a path for you through this program. I don't want to be in training. I don't want to be in sales, but we'll do it when it's beneficial to the membership, to the industry. But carving that stuff off, like I see some of our staff and individuals that I'm like, through a GNU or a program like that, they can become leaders. And I think that's where, like, we don't know education, we're membership based, we're busy, we'll fill the gaps, but like GNU and educational programs like that we know are being done right. And the other thing too is, like, on the courses that are available, knowing that there's an Indigenous lens to it, that's one of the things that when talking to my board, it's like, we need to make courses either inclusive or evaluated in a different lens than maybe it is typically done, and through programs that have the right leadership, it's being done. So, like, from that perspective, I would much prefer, not that we would prefer, but at times we develop our own courses and programs because we can influence the way it's delivered and meet the needs of our members and community. But that's taking us from other activities. So that's, I think, going back to the importance of it. We have a skills shortage. We can help bring people into the industry, but we're not there to train them. And it's like, at some point, like, we can train in-house with staff, but it's much quicker if it's done in a structured way and the curriculum's there. So I guess that's my plug in GNU. Like, I'm so excited by what it is, and I see all these people that I'm like, I want them to go through that program. So
I just want to jump in here too and say that our staff and our board have really started to listen. And I think listening is the most crucial piece. And when we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners and people that have been in the industry for a long time, they often say, like, I just don't have the time. It's great to hear there's something on the go here, and if I pay this much, I can get to do this and get this certification. I just don't have the time. So when we're listening to them, what we've kind of identified is really what they want to do is learn how to assess the situation, assess the opportunities and the risks, and then learn how to make a solid decision for themselves at their level. Because often, in my experience, it wasn't a lack of knowledge or even experience. It was just a lack of confidence to make a decision when it comes to business. And there's no right or wrong. So the staff have been doing an excellent job just kind of hand-holding with business owners to walk through that process. And then, as you're saying, there's institutions that are developing great things. And so when the time is right, if they have the right life stage too to go back to school, then that's great. And there's also lots of online programs. YouTube's amazing. You can learn so much just from online as well. But I find it comes down to that core decision-making opportunity. Being able to say, like, it could be small, like, should I hire another staff member or not? Or should I close my company on Saturday? Or it could be really big, like, should I expand and put down another, $100,000 on my company to develop something new? And those are not easy things to answer. So our organization tries to reach out as often as possible to businesses to give them that support, because that's what really leads to development in the long run.
All right. So for our future vision, looking ahead in the next 3 to 5 years, what is your vision for Indigenous tourism in your region and for the Atlantic provinces as a whole? What key milestones or developments do you hope to see during that time?
Sure. So one of the things I think I'd love to see, and I'm sure I speak for everyone, is it'd be fantastic to host the International Indigenous Tourism Conference in Atlantic Canada in that time frame. So somewhere in Atlantic Canada, it would be a massive group effort. IITC, which travels all around the world. It's a really big conference. But what that would mean for Atlantic Canada is that our members are ready to take on a size of amount of people that large. They're ready, they're export ready or market ready or business ready, but they have the skills, they have the competence, they have the capacity. So that means that we're doing our jobs to empower and equip these Indigenous tourism operators to be able to take on a conference that big and host people from all over the world in Atlantic Canada. And that also means that our associations have the capacity to grow and better serve our members and our tourism operators and have more staff and more growth, and that would be that ITC in Atlantic Canada would be a massive opportunity for even collaboration, partnership between non-Indigenous and Indigenous organizations and between our associations even further. So count on that. That'll come.
I was just going to mention, and I'm not sure if you knew, but we actually hosted the IITC in Membertou in 2016. So that was 10 years ago. 10 years ago. 10 years ago, yeah. So, I mean, we're definitely interested in hosting something like that, but the model has changed so much, and the cost of hosting it has changed so much. The cost of bidding has changed so much, but the need is even twice and greater than what it was back then, because of all the work that we're doing. We're exciting people, we're creating partnerships, allies are expecting the next step. So that's why we're interested in hosting something like that. I'll take that on, Mitchell, don't worry. But yeah, I mean, this is something where it's part of our plan. But the other thing I was going to mention, what does it look like, right, in the next few years? I mean, I really think about the work that we've done. We're still addressing many of the issues that came up 10 years ago. One of the words we talk about constantly is addressing authenticity about who we are. When net Kinu, who are we? How are we addressing those issues that are happening with pan-indigeneity? That is still a real thing that's happening with our people. Thank you. But truly, it's not an easy topic. What is ours? What is Olnu? What is Mi'kmaq? Going at Kinoe. Addressing that, answering that, takes such a huge amount of work. This is where tourism starts really shifting into the cultural side. And the challenges that exist is that a lot of our organizations and communities don't have specific cultural organizations. Like that's something I'm really pushing for back home, is like there needs to be a cultural organization because it's not there. We're dealt with having to address some of the issues that are happening there, and so we're not typically a cultural organization per se. And I'm not sure if you're dealing with it as much in your regions, but we are back home. And but to answer the question, 5-10 years time, I'd really like to have our organizations fully funded, with adequate staff, with programs across regions, with MOUs signed with DMOs, and so that means agreements signed with the regional tourism associations, which we're about to do ourselves. It also means that each of the communities have cultural tourism development officers. Each of the communities have their own tourism strategies, their own grassroots committees to address all of these things. Those are the things that we're hearing. Those are the things that we're trying to do with the work that we're doing with the research project. And ample funding for business growth. And what I've also noticed is that a lot of funding that comes down from government is targeted to community enterprise development. It's not targeted enough to entrepreneurship development. And there's a big difference. And so how do we ensure that we fight for the entrepreneurs, the artists, the crafters, also even finding ways to register to them so that they're eligible for these programs and support them. So that's kind of like my vision in the next few years, even sooner. But number one is securing that funding and having that funding that's tied into long-term sustainable agreements that, so now we're not, you know, chasing the money all the time, because that's a lot of our time and effort is chasing the money. And so if we had the opportunity to have the money there so that we can do our job much better, that's what I go to sleep at night thinking about. And I hope that changes sometime soon.
Thank you, Robert. Would anybody else like to chime in on that?
I echo Robert's thoughts on it, but a few things from the vision of what, like how we're trying to set up our organization. I see it being, PEI's in, I would say, you've had 10 years with the association. I feel like we're still in our early days of development, and where I would love to be is to have more entrepreneurs leading development. Right now it feels like it's a lot of community development at this stage, and it's probably similar in the other areas too, but it's like if we can make what we talked about before, the collaboration, if we can make Atlantic Canada an Indigenous tourism destination, entrepreneurs are seeing that there is profit to be made, we're communicating that tourism is a viable option, we're supporting them in that way, and there's bookable experiences being available to the visiting public. I think that's the vision of where we could potentially be, and we're trying to layer those steps to get there. PEI is in a good spot because it's small and we're a tourism destination. We have the visitors at our doorstep. If we can just develop the product and get it into the market, like we're there, we can make gains quickly. And I've only said this once before, but in 5 years, I want to compete against Anna Green Gables in terms of, you think about PEI, you think about Indigenous tourism. I said before, I'm going to take down potatoes in 2 years, lobster in 3, and market within 10 years. Anne is going to be second on that survey. So that's my vision.
I will just add, like, to both their points, you know, at the end of the day, the direction, like, nobody really knows the future, right? But the direction that we're going to head in is completely led by the people, 100%. We're not trying to sit back here and design something and hope that you guys will kind of weave into it. It's very much based on what you guys do on a daily basis, what you want to create, what you want to showcase, and most importantly, what you want to share, because that is up to you at all times. You have control of that. And then from what you do share out, what you do want to sell, we then shape an industry around you. And I think that that's kind of the way we're going to move forward, at least I know in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll do one more question. So what's needed for success? To achieve that vision, what do you believe is required, whether in terms of funding, partnerships, policy changes, or community engagement? How can the different associations and stakeholders support each other in reaching those goals?
Sure, so you're saying what kind of resources you said, sorry?
Yeah, basically, so like in terms of funding, partnerships, policy changes, community engagement, what do you believe is required? How can different associations and stakeholders support each other in reaching these goals?
I think it's honestly been shared already from what people have been saying on this panel. the collaboration not only between our associations but with funders, making sure that our funding is not something that we're chasing after, like Robert was saying, but it's something that is consistent and growing, and having that support even with our non-Indigenous counterparts, the tourism industry associations, and trying to have that, I would say, I guess, partnerships with the right people so that we're equipping our members and our Indigenous tourism operators with what they need to thrive, and building our capacities as associations so that we can do that. We're not taking our time to just try to stay alive or try to stay afloat, or having staff on and off here and there. I think it's important that when our associations are healthy, then we can provide as healthy offerings to our people so that we can grow the Indigenous tourism industry in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be controversial here, but I'm going to be. I think we need to work on models that other tourism organizations, associations currently benefit from. What I'm talking about is that a lot of tourism associations get their money through tariffs they charge for visitors that come here. They are coming to Mi'kma'ki ancestral territory. They are being taxed by other governments, not ours. And they're getting benefits from those people that are coming here, and we're not. That's an unfair advantage to other tourism and businesses and governments that are accessing those dollars. So we got to find a way, and this is called part of the revenue streams and you know, the own source revenues that, you know, they're getting. We don't have the same access to that. So how do we ensure that we have fair and adequate and equitable opportunities from governments that help to support the work that we're doing? I'm having those conversations right now with our DMO, because they're accessing like a lot of money from visitors that are getting charged those taxes through yeah. So I mean, those are the kind of things that are happening now, that we need to have those tough conversations with our leadership and with our governments to say, how can we access those dollars? Because, you know, our budgets and our strategies right now probably are funded at about a 30%, 40% capacity. Right? So if we need, let's say, $10,000, we're getting about $3,000. And if you multiply that into $1 million, we're getting about $300,000. And really, it's not the fault of the people that we're working with and the people that represent government, because that's the limitations that they're bound by or that they have to work with. So we have to create more opportunities to negotiate and find ways to access those dollars. So there's a lot of talk going on about the importance of reconciliation. It's enough talk. We got to start doing some stuff and turn that into reconciliation action, because too many times our people are the last ones to benefit, right? So anyway, I tried not to be controversial, but that is a very important place to start having conversations when it comes to funding.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up with that. I'd like to thank all of you guys for participating in the panel, and all of you guys for being here, and yeah.
Thank you.
Igande ha igo gwandu dana he